This is another Daily Bread Bible study here for us on day 173, Sunday, June 21st, 2020, focusing on Psalms 95 through 103. We have a lot of Psalms that we've raced through so far, given kind of one verse highlights of those Psalms. And this week is, this day and this week is the same as well too. We have a lot to get to. So let's look at Psalm 95. Psalm 95 verse 6 shows it's the setting of worship and praise. Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. We see a remembrance of the wandering of the Israelites in the wilderness and an admonition to not repeat the same things. In verse 8 and 9, do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day of Massah in the wilderness, when your ancestors tested me and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. It's kind of a lament of God saying that, people wanted to, see what God was doing, and yet even still, when God shows up and provides for them, even as they're grumbling in the wilderness, that it just wasn't enough, and people followed their own ways instead of God. In Psalm 96, it's a little different. It says, say among the nations, the Lord is king. The world is firmly established. It shall never be moved. He will judge the people with equity. So this is from verse 10, I should say. The idea is that God is a just God. God wants to treat people equitably and to give people, especially the poor and the needy and the oppressed, the orphaned and the widowed, all that they need in order to sustain their life, because God cares even about the least of these. This also makes God a worthy king, and one which his world and his life will not be removed. It is established and it will not be moved. So we give thanks that God continues on in his just kingly reign of justice. Psalm 97, I selected verse 2, which says, clouds and thick darkness are all around him. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. God is present in the natural world, and we see it list images of fire and lightning and mountains even. Everything else in this world are idols, right? They can become objects of worship. They are just these images that God has created or humans have created, but they are not a replacement for the true God. Psalm 98 says, make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth into joyous song and praise and sing praises. Sing praises to the Lord with a lyre and the sound of melody. This imagery of song and singing praises to God, of using our instrumentation and our voices to be able to lift up music towards God. And what do we say with all of this? We give thanks. And we break out because all the good things God has done for us. In Psalm 99, verse number 4, it says, mighty King, lover of justice, you have established equity, you have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Another psalm of praise for God and continuing in that theme of giving thanks. So Psalm 100, in that vein, is a psalm of thanksgiving. It is a very short psalm, only 5 verses long. And it's a worship psalm inviting people to experience the joyful presence of God, just as these past few psalms have been inviting people to worship. So in verse 3, a very fitting one says, know that the Lord is God. It is he that made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. So it's important to remember that we are created beings, created by God, and to give thanks to God, our Creator. In Psalm 101, it's a psalm of David, and it says in verse 4, perverseness of heart shall be far from me. I will know nothing of evil. That's the hope that King David does. King David is human, and ultimately, he sins with Bathsheba and killing Uriah. But he does want his heart to be transformed and changed and to be focused on God's ways. So this psalm is less focused on our thoughts, but it's more focused on actions, and especially actions to build a trustworthy community. At the end of the psalm, it mentions, destroy all the wicked in the land. That's not something I would add to my prayer, as much as just saying, God, help us to focus on the good and not to focus on evil. That will steer us right. In Psalm 102, it's a prayer of one afflicted when faint and pleading before the Lord, as it says. So I selected verses 9 and 10 to encapsulate that feeling. It says, "For I eat ashes like bread and mingle tears with my drink, because of your indignation and anger, for you have lifted me up and thrown me aside." This is another hard feeling, right? I wonder if this is connected with some of the imagery around the siege of Jerusalem, there by Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar coming in around 587 BC, and we see that Jerusalem is sacked. So this feels very much like it's connected with that theme of when Jerusalem is destroyed, and it's a feeling of just feeling depressed and your hopes and dreams being utterly crushed. So if you find yourself there in that moment in time, this is a good and fitting psalm to go to. Psalm 103. This is one that I selected two parts from. The first is verses 2 through 5, and the last is 12 through 13. There are some really good parts from this psalm. Verse 2 says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and do not forget all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good as long as you live, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles." This is a God who is for us, a God that we are called to bless, because a God who has a lot of benefits for us. God is quick to forgive and quick to bless, which is a great thing. So we have an imagery of the forgiveness here in verse 12 and verse 13. "As far as the east is from the west, so far he removes our transgressions from us." And in verse 13, "As a father has compassion for his children, so the Lord has compassion for those who fear him," which is a fitting verse to close on June 21st, 2020, which is also Father's Day. So may you experience good fathering, and may God be a gracious and loving Father for you as well too.